In this video, I'm going to directly respond to recent criticisms from the Hawkeye Report. Am I crazy? Well, let's stop stalling and start getting into these comments. What's going on, wrestling fans? My name's Josiah, and welcome to Fanco Wrestling. On this channel, I talk all about wrestling news, tips, and lifestyle to great wrestling fans like you that like to engage in discussion. And recently, one of you brought up the fact that Fanco Wrestling was kind of making headlines, I don't want to say headlines, but being discussed in the Hawkeye Report online blog. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Hawkeye Report, it's pretty much what it is a forum where wrestling fans, really all Hawkeye fans, but wrestling fans discuss just things going on in the world of wrestling concerning the Iowa Hawkeyes. And they have been known to be pretty darn brutally honest about their opinions. And a lot of times, yes, they are just guys and gals behind keyboards able to type whatever they want, and some of them haven't necessarily even been on the map before, don't even know what these guys go through. But recently, I was brought up. Fanco Wrestling was brought up, and I thought it'd be fun to respond to some of the comments that I received on the page. So thank you for bringing that up. But before we get any further, I want to invite you, if you are a fan of college wrestling and want to learn more about news, just hit that subscribe button so you can keep updated with everything going on. So let's head on right over to the Hawkeye Report. So what's going on with the Hawkeye Report? Well, the first post, which was all the way back on October 31st. And kind of what I did here is just search the Hawkeye Report for Fanco Wrestling. So there may be other things that they've said, but this is what I have found. So as far as what's going on here, the first thing, back from October 31st, Fanco Wrestling predicts Hawks with 10 All-Americans. Something I still hold very true, and at the beginning of the season, yeah, that made a lot of sense, but it still does, considering they have all of their guys, I believe, right now ranked in the top 5. Now, SoCal Hawks fan writes, not sure how many on here are familiar with this YouTube channel, which is, understandable, still a growing YouTube channel. But this kid, a little bit older than that kid, has the Hawks with 10 AAs. All right. Starting off pretty easy there. No responses to that on that piece of the forum. So let's head on over now to this. So we're going to head on over now to the Fanco is just its own forum right now. It's its own kind of discussion. And this comes from Case IH. So I just started watching this guy's videos on YouTube this year. You can tell he's a Penn State fan, which I am. What is everyone else's opinions of him? Uh-oh. I saw today he's predicting that Shakur Rasheed is not so much sitting out due to significant injury, but bulking up to take the 197 spot. And this is posted back on December 10th. The 197 spot. Also, he mentioned wrestling smaller schools and not going to any big tournaments this year, so their top guys can stay ranked high for seeding purposes. He's talking about Penn State not going to any big tournaments, but kind of staying at smaller tournaments and just doing a lot of duels, mostly because of the Olympics, but also to give some of their guys, kind of a leg up in some of the rankings, which so far has worked, and if it works, keep it going. I was curious on everyone's thoughts, so let's get into it. Nothing really there yet. Some people just talking about Shakur weighing in the other night and exactly what's going on. This was a time where they weren't exactly sure what was going on with Shakur Rasheed. This guy says, I think the guy has pretty good takes on things. Well, thank you. He's not exactly a professional speaker. I'll debate that. But he's worth a listen. Thank you. As far as 184, 197, that seems pretty clear. Okay. Not sure what seems clear there, but I would assume it's that Shakur's there. And Ski says, for a Penn State fan, he is pretty clueless. Kale mentioned before the season began that fans would see a number of different lineups this year due to injuries. The 125 and 149 positions being up for grabs, and with a number of guys wrestling in freestyle tournaments. The freestyle tournament many are wrestling in later this month is why Penn State did not enter into a New Year's tournament this year. Okay. The goal is always to be able to field the best team he can come March, which is true. Finally, Kale has had to update his plans based on Connell not looking anywhere near being able to score points at NCAAs, and also based on it looking like his body may not hold up for an entire season anyway. Like I said, these fans are brutally, brutally honest. His original plan was for Rashid at 184 and Connell at 197. Connell is no longer the best option at 97, and Kale thinks Brooks Rashid at 84.97 is a better option than Rashid Beard at those weights, which yes, that's what it seemed like at the time. However, I doubt that this guy has any insight into exactly what Kale thought at the beginning of the season, especially on December 10th. Just like I don't know exactly what was going on through Kale's head. Just like most people don't know what was going on through his head. But I respect the criticisms there, and I don't think I'm clueless as a Penn State fan, but thanks for those. Kale, says Penn State sending 26 to Wilkes Open. He doesn't really say anything about Fanco Wrestling there. And this guy says, I don't mind the videos. You can never have enough wrestling content. But does he actually have takes? I thought he mostly just summarizes stuff, which can certainly be helpful. And if it's a take, it's usually pretty obvious. Like, we learned that the Heat is definitely number one at Cliff Keen, Las Vegas. I think that's overemphasizing things a little bit. If he's a Penn State fan, I never realized it, which is interesting. Doesn't he have an Iowa hat and Gable photo in the background in addition to, I think, the Penn State hat? He also wears various teams' gear, such as Campbell. Yes, I do wear Campbell gear because that is where I'm working at Campbell University. I do have a Gable hat. Actually, my Iowa hat right here is a Dan Gable, Terry Brands, and Tom Brands signed hat. I do have a Penn State signed hat by Cale Sanderson, and yes, this is my Gable poster right here. So it's interesting that you mentioned that you never thought I was a Penn State fan, which is kind of funny to me, and fine, because I do try to be fair. I do try to be honest. I do let some bias show at times, but I do say that that's what happens. As far as me having takes, as far as Fanco Wrestling having takes, right now I don't think it's necessarily that important for me to have takes. I do the content that I like. I talk about what I do, and I like discussing what's going on in the wrestling world. I think too many times people get caught up in these takes, and it leaves a poor taste in people's mouths. A lot of news sources kind of attack these college wrestlers and saying, he's a horrible wrestler, he can't do this, he can't do that. And if you want to call that a take, that's fine. That's just not what Fanco Wrestling is about. Don't really do that here. Dwayne Johnson, maybe The Rock, I don't know, says, I believe he's a Penn State grad, true, and got hired by Campbell as a social media coordinator for the wrestling team. And that is a fact. Both of those are facts. I'm a Penn State grad, 2017, and hired on to Campbell last year. Willits says, I find him to be rather uninformed most of the time, and he just guesses at stuff. I watch about 2 to 3 minutes of video, and then I think, why am I still watching this? That's a rough one. Sorry, Willits, that you feel that way. Now, yes, at times I do make predictions. I don't think I'm just guessing at things. I do try to be as informed as I can about everything going on in the world of college wrestling. Back a lot of my opinions up with stats, with facts, but yeah, I appreciate you at least watching 2 to 3 minutes of the video. That means a lot. And then this guy says, I thought I was the only one. Well, thanks for still watching. Robin Hawk says he does have Iowa and Penn State hats and a Gable poster on the wall behind him, as I just said. He has admitted several times that he's a Penn State fan, but I find that when he gives his opinions, he gives rational reasons, thank you, for his opinions, and invites others to share their opinions with him, even if you disagree with him. Always do that. I always do that. I think it's so important to listen to what wrestling fans have to say, whether I agree or disagree. And at the end of the day, I'm a Penn State fan, yes. However, I just like seeing great wrestling. I love seeing great wrestling. That's why, I always root for guys like a Spencer Lee, who, no, he's not a Penn State wrestler. He's an Iowa wrestler. But guess what? He brings enjoyment. He brings excitement he brings a spark to the world of wrestling and gets people watching. And that's, and also he's from Pennsylvania, which is another reason I enjoy watching him. But I think that's important to note here. And he continues, his Penn State bias does show at times, but at least he admits it. I think he does a lot of work to present his articles. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. For example, his attempt to forecast the starting lineups for several schools, I found that to be interesting, and as well as did a lot of people, and a lot of Iowa fans did too. So I really appreciate that because there was a lot of time and effort that went into those. I will still watch and listen to his presentations until I think he's unfair in his analysis, and I think that's totally fair to me. And then this guy says, looks like you're correct on both accounts. And he references an article here talking about Campbell Wrestling and me being hired on. And the last article, the last discussion point, turning point on recruiting. This was a recent video on the Fanco Wrestling channel. Val Hull says, the Fanco guy, that's me, made a video that Spencer Lee didn't turn Iowa around, but in fact it was Kemmerer that was the turning point in recruiting, which I still believe is the truth. I went back and found articles about the commitment or transfer in or out for the current starting lineup and select members of the non-starting lineup. While I don't argue with the Fanco guy's point, but it seems like it might have been Tom that changed things. And he's referencing an article talking about Brands is wired differently. And I know the article he's kind of talking about when Kemmerer, which I did reference in the video, Kemmerer wasn't really sure if Iowa was the place for him because of certain things that went down on his recruiting trip, and Brands just jumped in the car sometime within like that week, maybe even a couple of days after he left, drove straight to his hometown in Murraysville, Pennsylvania from Iowa, made like the 18-hour trip or whatever it was, and said, look, things happen with this recruiting trip. I know that this isn't how you are. I know you don't like to drink. I know that there's another guy I'm trying to recruit heavily, and Alex Marinelli does not like to drink. And guess what? We want you both, and that's the program that we want to build. And that's the program Iowa Hawkeyes have built from that point onward, from making that shift to a couple of these guys. But it's interesting that what you're saying here in this post. So he's just kind of referencing a couple of these guys, when they committed, where they committed from, and all of that. And that's in reference to my video there. And then just one comment there responding to exactly what's going on there. So really, a lot of interesting discussion and engagement on the Hawkeye Report. Not all good, which is fine. And I appreciate the feedback and the discussion. I look forward to continuing to grow Fanco Wrestling. I'm humbled that I'm even mentioned on the Hawkeye Report because I consider them, a pretty cool not news forum, but just a forum to discuss things. And yeah, I'm cool with being thrown into the fire if you want to throw me out there. If I'm a Penn State fan and you want to attack me, Iowa Hawkeye fans, that's fine. But I'm still rooting for you guys this year too, to see your guys do well, just because I like seeing great wrestling. And really, at the end of the day, that's that. But one thing I do want to say is thank you, everybody who does support the Fanco Wrestling channel and all the great members of this community, because responding to this negativity, like a little bit of negativity, is fine. But, for the most part, this channel is built on the positivity and the news and engagement and discussion around wrestling, and I really appreciate that. And if I couldn't take criticisms, then I wouldn't be making these videos still. So until next time, guys, I'll see you then.